Hello, I'm Tara Ruckman.
And I'm Stephanie Howe, and we are Control the Chaos EDU. Are you burnout? Are you feeling frustrated or overwhelmed?
Or maybe it's the opposite, and you're a go-getter and want to level up. Then it's time to dive in with real talk and solution-focused conversations.
Welcome to today's Control the Chaos conversations. Today we're going to be talking about 4 different ways that you can energize your parent-teacher communication so that way you can have a more successful and smooth school year. And this comes back to when I was teaching. It was my second year of teaching, and I started to hear all of these rumors from other teachers, elementary teachers, and just teachers that have worked with a family that I was going to have their student. And they kept saying, like, this parent is really difficult. And I was getting kind of nervous. And what I learned that year is I actually loved working with that parent. They're probably one of my favorite families that I got to work with. And everybody else is like saying how difficult this parent was. But the reason that I built this relationship with this parent, one, I think I kind of knew. And so I was able to think about how I was going to communicate with this parent, work with this parent. And I was told myself I was going to out crazy this parent in communication. It worked. It did take a lot of upfront time, but once I built that relationship before the student even set foot in my classroom, and I was able to email them, like, yes, I was doing it outside of my day, but it made my life so much easier because by December, that parent trusted me and I didn't need to communicate as much as I was. So that's my secret. If you have that parent that might be a little crazy, out communicate them. You need to reach out to them first. You need to explain if something happened, communicate with them, even if it's something small, because that parent wants to be involved. I've also dealt with parents that don't want to be involved, or maybe it's not don't want to be involved. I think all parents do want to be involved, or they're just busy, or they're not able to communicate in the same way of some of our crazy parents that love that communication. But again, just getting there out there and being able to communicate first with that parent, figuring out what way they wanted me to communicate them, if it was email, if it was a phone call, and then out crazy in them. It worked.
I love that so much. I mean, you brought a smile to my face this morning, but it's so true, isn't it? The fact that some of the hardest parents, the way to get them to turn around is just communicate with them. You know, that's all it takes. Sometimes we have some of the most difficult parents that we come across, but if we just start giving them all the information that they need or want, then we start to see that crazy turn into one of the best parents that can come into the classroom.
Yeah. And so again, today we're going to be talking about 4 different ways. I'm going to give some suggestions on different things I used with that parent that really just kind of helped. So the first one is newsletters. So when it comes to newsletters, you want to maybe think about, how am I going to send this? Is it going to be weekly? Is it going to be biweekly? Is it going to be monthly? And you kind of want to communicate that upfront with your parents, like, hey, we have a monthly newsletter, or hey, this is a weekly newsletter. And then you want to try to stay consistent with it. I know if you skip a week, it's usually okay, but typically staying upfront with that can really help. And so in the show notes, I put in there a bunch of templates from newsletters that teachers have created. It was like a make and take series, and you can feel free to add to this. Some teachers, again, if you're doing like a weekly one, might go over the week. So on Monday, what are the students doing? On Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe from the teacher, what they're learning this week. How can parents contact you? And if there's any upcoming events, maybe like the first day of school's coming up, or maybe the PTO is having some type of meeting, and just helping that communication from the office can help your parents stay in the know. If there's any important reminders, maybe you have a classroom economy and you need parents to donate supplies. Parents are always willing to donate. They just need to know what you need. So again, just kind of think about what you might include in that newsletter. And when you're creating that newsletter, one barrier can be collecting emails. And so what I suggest to teachers is creating a contact group. And once you have that contact group, create a label with that contact group. You can reuse that label throughout the whole year and then send it out weekly. I also had some teachers print the first one and they would just say, I sent an email, but if you did not get the email, you need to let me know. So that way, if you have the wrong email or they retyped it incorrectly or there was some type of error, you can fix it right away. Tara, what are your suggestions when it comes to newsletters?
In my classroom, I used to do a box for each subject. What we did in ELA, what we did in math, what we did in social studies, and what we did in science, all those core events. Of course, I didn't, it wasn't, if they had art or something that week, those teachers might sometimes add to it. But most often it was the core subjects that I sent home, to always let the parents know what was going on in the classroom. Again, I also did what you were saying, upcoming events, if we had anything going on. One of the things I like to do as well, though, if we had a big project or something that was going on that was like a higher level, that took more time to do, I would also link those things into the newsletter so that the teacher would have the chance, or the parent would have the chance to see what that project really entailed and kind of grasp the whole thing of what we were working on. And that might not be something that you do for older kids, but that might be something you do for the younger age, is linking, that project there so they could really see what that project looks like that they're working on. So those were some of the things that were very successful in my newsletters. And just having the template was huge for me because you didn't have to redo the newsletter each week, but just kind of copying and pasting little blurbs into the newsletter. Maybe just do a section that could be the same every week, like a what's the scoop or what's the buzz, and just a little blurb about like what's the hot topic of the classroom that week. So that's also something we did. And then if you have other teachers, you could also do, if you work in a team of teachers, you could have that common newsletter. If you work in subjects, if you're in the junior high or the middle school, where it's one newsletter that goes home and everybody's adding their own piece as well. So then it's really quick to do it because you're not doing it all. But I taught all the subjects, so I did the newsletter by myself, but that's not the case for everybody. Some people are doing those teams, so it can go really quickly to have that team newsletter.
Yeah, and you're able to just click share and share it with your team pretty quickly for them to update that link or whatever they need to update. But being on the same page just kind of helps if you are a team and everybody sends in the same newsletter.
One of the tips that I do like to say is, though, that try not to make it too wordy. I know, parents have busy lives, right? So if you have short phrases, bullet points, keep it a page or less, they're more likely to get that information than they would if you have this big, long, couple paragraphs. I learned that very quickly. I was putting all of this time into doing my newsletter, and then I would get an email and it would have questions in it of what was in the newsletter, because they would just kind of look at it, skim it, not read the whole thing because it was too wordy. And then I would be answering questions that were in the newsletter anyway. So I started shortening it, using those bullet points, short phrases, and then I was getting less emails and less questions on things, events that were coming up, because I was shortening it a little bit and making it more of a quick read for parents.
Yeah, and use a similar template is what I suggest too. Is usually with my newsletters to my staff, I just duplicate it. So if they need to go back to something, they can. If they need something, it's always there for them. But if you always have upcoming events in the right corner, your parents will know exactly where to go to find those upcoming events if they need to look. So that can even help too. The next thing is using videos. So just hit record. So when you're maybe working with parents, maybe you have a newsletter template and just kind of talk with them. Add your personal face down in the bottom that can help with that personal touch. But maybe just walking through some of the different things and parents can listen to you, or you could even upload the audio to a podcast. So if they're in the car, they can listen to your weekly update. So sometimes just adding video can help as well, especially when you're introducing yourself to your parents and they haven't even met you yet.
Or a reel. Can you do a reel where it had
Yeah.
like little pictures or little videos of the students? If, of course, if they have signed those waivers at the beginning of the year that they don't mind sharing their picture and the videos with the class, but you could do a little reel to put together for parents, 2 minutes long, just shows what you did all week, the activities that the class was working on.
And then the next thing is just maybe instead of you sending emails, what if you gave that over to the students? So what we have at a couple of our schools is students are taking ownership of this weekly email, and they are responsible to send it to their parents. So in Google Classroom, the teacher will send out the template. And when the teacher sends out the template, the students have to go in and they finish like the sentence starter. So maybe like in math, I learned, and then they would finish that sentence starter for that week. Or I was a hero by, and they explain something that they did that went over and above, or how they helped someone. And so again, all of these newsletters are really personal. They're not generic like your tip number one, where it's that just kind of everybody gets the same newsletter. But if students start to send them, then they are personal. You can also add those upcoming events and all of that detail because you set up the template before you send it out to your students. So that can even be a way to save some time and make it personal for your parents.
I love that. Now tell me about this personal template when you share it with the students. What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's usually a Google slide because it's me. And that's the only thing I really use in Google, I think. And so it's a Google slide. And what it has is it has like different boxes set up on this template. And so, again, if you are a team or self-contained, it works really well. You have math, ELA, you've got your science, social studies. You can add, I like to add how like a student has maybe done something behaviorally, because like then the student can have that conversation with their parents. And then maybe like something that they've met a goal or something like that. Or even like if they're on track or off track, if you're using like a self-pacing type of tracker, you could even add reflections for the week. So there's so many different things that you can add. I do have a template that I can put in the show notes that can kind of give you an example for how you might use this with your students. But once the students have it, they type in their own responses. Typically, the first time you do it, it does take more time. But once students get in the routine, it goes really quick. So that is a roadblock, is the first time you do it, it takes about 30 minutes. But then after that, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes once they do it every single week and they know how to do it. Also, when they're doing it, they have to set up their parent emails in their accounts. Some of our elementary students cannot send outside the district. So just make sure. So this is probably more of a 5th grade and up activity. But if you're elementary and you're able to do that, or you're able to use like a Seesaw or Blooms or something like that, you can use that where students are tagging their parents in their work and they're able to see their comments. So there are different ways that you can help those elementary students start this skill. But again, at middle school, they can really start to send these off to their parents.
And when you're doing that, and you're implementing this into the classroom, are you checking the details of each student to see if what they're sending to the parents, to make sure that they're, say, if they do have a behavioral issue, that they're not forgetting to put that into the email to their parents?
Yeah, so if there's a certain student, you could tell that student, hey, I want you to CC me on this email. Some teachers have the whole class CC them on an email. So, but if you've got 90 kids, just know that that could be a lot of emails coming your way. So if that is how you want to do it, that's fine. Also, you do have access to it in Google Classroom. So because the students are going to have it like create their template and then send it through email, you do have that as well. But most teachers will just say, add me as a CC. They look through it. They can add additional comments on that email thread to the parent. And then students are able to work together on that.
Perfect. Perfect. I love it. I love it. All right. So, one of the last ways to energize your parent teacher conference, again, there's lots of districts that have apps like Talking Points, Remind 101. I know typically we don't want to text, we'd rather email just so that we have that record of communication. But through these apps, Seesaw, you mentioned, I know we have Class Dojo that parents have used, Blooms, but our district really got into Talking Points this year. So those are some of the apps that you can use, which is a great way to communicate, whether it's a one-way app or a two-way app, but it's a quick way. I mean, I feel like families are bound to their phones. A lot of people are bound to their phones, or parents are working, and the quickest way to reach them is through their phone, right? Because they're on the job. Maybe they're not at their computer all day long, but they might have their phone that they carry with them. Or maybe they're not at work. Maybe they're just out and about. But a quick way to reach parents, if you have something important to tell them, or a message to send, might be through those apps that they get those notifications on their phone. Have you used any of those apps when you were in the classroom, Steph?
Yeah, I used Remind 101 because when I was back in the classroom, Talking Points didn't exist. And so with Remind, it made it just super easy because some parents don't check email. And so if a parent wasn't checking email, I could send them a quick text message and I would usually get a faster response, especially if I tried to call them and they didn't answer. So sometimes just sending them a text message really helped. Like, hey, this is going on. Just wanted you to be updated. With Talking Points, the reason I love Talking Points is because it will translate the language into the home language. So if the family speaks Spanish, it's going to take what you typed and it's going to translate that for you, which is really amazing that we have technology that can do that, because that was a huge barrier when I was teaching. Is usually I had families, that spoke a different language. And so the child or an older child had to be the interpreter for that family. And so then they would be reading the emails or they would be trying to explain the text message. But instead now I can just send straight to that parent's language.
That is a huge piece of communication for our district. I know we have quite a melting pot. I know we have over 60 languages in our district, and clearly, to be able to have that translation at your fingertips and be able to do it immediately is breaking down huge barriers in our district. So definitely thankful for our coordinator that helped bring Talking Points to our district. But having a system, really, it's not just about Talking Points, but any system that can easily translate. Looking at Google Translate, if you have an email to send, Google Translate to break down those communication barriers are huge, right? Because we do have parents that are not speaking the language, and maybe their students do, or maybe they're newcomers, whatever the case is. But that communication and just communicating to them in their language so that they can understand what's going on in the classroom is huge for some of our kiddos.
Yeah, so this week your action item is to think about how you're going to communicate with your parents this school year. Are you going to create a newsletter? Are you going to put that ownership on your students? Are you going to create a video message or use texting? So think about that and start to create your template or your idea of how you want to organize your thoughts to communicate with those crazy parents this school year.
And you know what? If you are not a teacher and you're an administrator or you're a coach, be thinking about those ways that you're going to communicate with your staff. Be thinking about different ways that you can, a lot of teachers, we're getting principal emails, we're getting newsletters. How do we combine that so, it's not throwing as much at teachers, but not just that parent teacher communication, but also staff to staff communication as well, when we really wrap our heads around communication. What does that look like throughout the building? What do they say? Like what could have been, what was a professional development could have been an email. So what does that look like in your building as well, besides just doing parent to teacher? So again, call to action. Think about the way you're going to communicate with your parents or staff. And until next time, control the chaos.
Thanks for listening to Control the Chaos EDU. Check out the description for show notes.
We look forward to connecting with you on social media. Subscribe to the weekly podcast so you never miss an episode. Control the chaos. Until next time.